Hey guys, so I am saying hi from here outside first time, and I just wanted to say that this was an amazing interview with Ayat. She is head of InvestPro and co-founder of FigPi, and she shared amazing 5 CRO principles and mistakes that you should know if you are converting your website visitors and trying to improve the conversion. So do check that out, and we'll just look into the interview right away.
Hi, Ayat. How are you doing?
Good, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for today podcast. I mean, my listeners will be really excited to have whatever you have because I've been a huge fan. I am a FigPi customer. That's how you pronounce it, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And I also am a student of InvestPro. I'm a huge fan of Khalid Saleh because he has really good content. I wish I had that content. So I'm really looking forward to that. But just a little bit of understanding who you are, what have you been doing so far? Can you just give a little bit more context?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ayat Shukairy. I am the co-founder at Invest and FigPi, which is our SaaS solution. I've been doing conversion rate optimization now since 2006, so it's a very long time when CRO wasn't even called CRO. So I've been kind of in the industry for a very long time and grown with it and seen kind of like that evolution and that change that's happened. And so I'm really glad to be here and talk to your listeners today.
Great. We need you. We want you. We want to hear more stories, actually. So, talking about the stories, what do you have for us? Can you tell us a little bit about the? You said like FigPi was actually an internal tool, and so I want to know a little bit more about that. How did you come up with it? Like, when did you start thinking about having your own tool?
Yeah, so we've been kind of again doing consulting for a very long time for our clients, and every single time we have to do a project, we have to kind of use another solution, and there's always kind of like the frustration and the cost that is associated with using another solution from our client side. So we said, hey, this doesn't really make sense. We're already they're spending so much with consulting. Let's try to figure out a way to do a lot of the different things that we need, like in the data collection part that we need internally with an internal tool. And that was kind of how the idea came about. So we started building the tool. And at the time, actually, which is, I think, like kind of the ups and downs of business, we had, not really by choice, but we had ended up going to Istanbul, Turkey, and so while there, we decided let's open up kind of our international office. It just kind of so happened that we were there, for other reasons outside of our control, and we decided let's just open up our international office in Istanbul, and that's where we were able to get kind of hire developers and start building the tool, and then kind of utilize it internally. So we never really, I think at the beginning, we never really thought that we would push it so that it's kind of public. We just thought we would kind of keep it internally. But as you know, Azar, I don't know if you're familiar, but consulting is very exhausting. And, so I think like there's always that dream of not necessarily being so heavy on the consulting side and maybe have a little bit more balance and be a little bit more choosy about the type of clients that we also have. And when you have like a solution that's kind of paying for itself, you don't necessarily need to rely so much. And that's where kind of like the idea was like, hey, let's just try to push this, and hopefully we can relieve some of the consulting side as well.
Okay. So you said last time to me that the reason why you went with FigP was because the existing tools were not good enough, correct? So
Yeah.
I want to know why weren't not they good enough?
I mean, they provide the data that you need, but the problem is that, for example, again, a lot of the A/B testing solutions, because a lot of CRO work has to do with A/B testing. They're so expensive. And most of our clients are, larger, so they would require, the enterprise level of paying for those solutions. So paying for consulting and paying for a solution just was not flying with a lot of clients. So that was one aspect. So the cost was prohibitive in general. The other thing was that, we couldn't find solutions that provided everything, meaning like, well, we wanted heat maps, video recording, A/B testing on one platform, one set of data, having everything kind of in one place. But we always ended up kind of using different tools, and we just want to keep it all. And it wasn't sometimes because some of those tools don't provide it. It's because our clients had access to all those tools. We want to use video recording with, Crazy Egg. We want to do heat maps with, Hotjar, and we want to do A/B testing with VWO. So it just becomes overwhelming, the amount of different touch points and the amount of different platforms that you have to use and the different sets of data that you have to decipher. How is this and why is this different? And, kind of find those similarities between the different platforms. And you're already using kind of Google Analytics and in addition to all those other tools. So that's kind of another motivation for us, is that, keeping everything in one place is a lot easier to have that control.
Okay. But is there any feature that they didn't have and you wanted to have in FigPay? So just to be much more concrete.
Yeah. So actually, one of the tools that we had come up with that we, and this is one of those, I guess, field, approaches. We wanted to do this one tool, and we created it actually, and we did the development for it, but we just never really launched it, which was called Panorama. And it would essentially take all of our conversion framework elements, like trust, confidence, like FUDs, whatever it is, within the conversion framework. And then it would kind of give suggestions to what the visitor, based on, what's kind of going on, to kind of A/B test. So, unfortunately, that particular part of the tool, which is something that we have, like, because of our experience and because of the amount of A/B tests that we've actually run, we actually have a lot of, that data there. And, we have even kind of like percentages of these particular or this particular type of test or this particular type of problem resulted in this type of a result. And so we really want to kind of push that, and it never really kind of went forward. That was kind of something unique and different. And honestly, right now, when we're looking at it, we're in a crowded space. There's no doubt about it. You're absolutely right. Hotjar, Optimizely, VWO, they all kind of offer similar things to what we're already offering. And there's so many more tools, by the way. Every single day I hear about a new tool that's kind of providing the same exact thing that we're providing. But, we also have kind of that unique conversion rate optimization perspective. We've run a lot of experiments. We are marketers ourselves. We know kind of what works and what doesn't. So, for example, kind of when we're right now, the way that we launched our tool is that it's kind of very basic. But where we're going with the tool is that a lot of the information that we've already gathered in terms of, our experience and what type of video recording would be useful. I mean, watching 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 videos is just brutal for any marketer to be able to decipher information. I'm sure, you're on FigPie. That's hard, what are you going to do with 50, 60 videos, and who's going to sit there and watch all those videos and really be able to gather data? But, what we've learned is there's certain patterns, and there are patterns that we are, trying to be able to kind of capture from the visitor. So we say that, out of all the, 100 videos that you've captured, these 10 are the most important that you need to watch because they have, these types of things. And I'm sure that I see that you're nodding. So I assume that that's something that would be really kind of welcomed. And that's what we're trying to bring to it, because, it is hard to distinguish yourself in this market and kind of be a little bit kind of different and offer something different. And the the thing that we have that I don't know if the other tools have is that we have the perspective of, as a marketer, as somebody who does CRO, how do I make better use of this tool, and how is it going to be something that I'm going to be able to get the information that I need, and then actually take that information and use it in some way that's useful on the site, make the changes that I need to make.
Okay, makes sense. So I understand, you had a problem, you said, hey, why not have all the data in one place? So you started your internal tool, then you recently released it. before releasing it, you must have seen some growth with some tools because of some experiment with some of the clients you had. And these are, like you told me last time, that these are the big clients who pay a lot of money for the agency as well as the tool together. Tell me, like, the tool itself, like a story where in a short format where you can say, hey, this was a client, he came in, this I couldn't do, and then we did this, and then we found out and we made a ton of money with it. So okay, do you have some kind of story like that?
Yeah, I mean, we were lucky enough. Actually, one of the first clients that we onboarded onto our tool was Rainbow. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Rainbow Shops. A huge company in the U.S., $1 billion company, essentially. And so we were lucky enough that when we actually released the tool, even internally, they were one of our clients. And so we were able to kind of onboard them onto the tool. And so anything that you run on, like A is like the number of experiments that you can possibly run on a company like that that's getting that much traffic is amazing. And then and I think like one of the best things that happened was, like a lot of times we would suggest certain experiments and we'd want to run them, and then the person that was kind of working on the account was just like, no, this is not going to work, this is not going to fly with our typical customer, all this stuff. And so of course, being able to launch and then seeing those amazing results and just kind of him quieting completely, because basically he learned something very different about his customers that he didn't know before, and just kind of proving that, hey, the online customer isn't like the offline customer, because they have a lot of like offline stores. So the offline customer just interacts differently. They're a different type of profile than the online, and kind of being able to prove through some of the different experiments that we were able to run was really great. And again, one of the things that we went to when we were in Istanbul, actually, they have this one conference called Startup Istanbul, and so we like at the time like presented actually FigPi. So I actually brought up the story of Rainbow and how we were able to kind of run some A/B tests and really get kind of some amazing results in terms of the amount of revenue they were able to make after using FigPi. So that's kind of like a really good feel good kind of story that really also motivated us to say, hey, like there's something here that we can kind of use with other customers.
So concretely, what exactly did he figure it out that he didn't know before?
Concretely, that like the way that who the customer is. Like for example, if we're going to change like something on the cart, they have an assumption that their customer behaves a certain way, and their customer is going to interact with the site a certain way. So we made those changes, and he's like, it's not going to work. And we're like, well, okay, it's not going to work, but let's A/B test it. Let's see if it's going to work or not. And we were able to kind of show that, yes, you know what, they are different than what you expect. They're not going to interact with the site the way that you expect as well.
Cool. Okay, that's a good experiment to run. And so makes sense. I mean, that's just one story that you can say you, because of so much of traffic and data, you couldn't figure out from the other tool. How has this tool actually helped you to grow your business faster? Like how exactly, like other than doing so many experiments in controlled group and your own under your own hood, like how do you think that having an internal tool? Because usually I'm against internal tool, because for one simple reason, because user pilot is not an internal tool. I'm actually fighting against build versus buy. There's a podcast on build versus buy where Google actually bought an external tool, and they actually went with a vendor who was much better at their own tool. Google has no limited resources of developers, right? So they still went with an external tool. So I really want to challenge you on this and try to find out when exactly it makes sense to actually have the tool internally, and how did it help you grow faster?
And again, I think it kind of happens sometimes, and I think that's why it's kind of important when you're building something, that sometimes things happen kind of organically. They're not necessarily planned a certain way. Like I said, we weren't planning on necessarily pushing this so that it's no longer internal. But I think, again, trying to steer away from being kind of more focused on consulting and looking at kind of like that SaaS platform and what that can offer, like our company in terms of like growth, like in terms of being able to onboard so many more, types of clients and being able to service them, and not necessarily, kind of like that slow paced consulting doesn't scale, whereas something like a SaaS tool will. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking to kind of like scale and grow a lot more than at a different pace than what we were before. And so, kind of when we made the decision, and it was kind of earlier this year, we said, we want to get at least 100 active users on BigPie. Like that's the goal. It's a simple goal. We're not really going for anything like really extravagant. But we were able to actually build that to 1,000 active users on BigPie within, like less than a year, which has been really like amazing for us. So we're able to kind of see that growth in that, and I really attribute it to the fact that we've been very kind of active in terms of building like kind of a community around us. In terms of being is we've had that history of being the old CROs, like we started out in 2006. And so bringing that experience and having that community around us has really kind of propelled us to move forward. And so I think sometimes when you have that, you've already built that community, pushing out some sort of tool and deciding that I'm going to go with this is a lot easier than when you don't really have anything and you're just like, okay, I'm just going to launch a tool. Well, you can build it, but nobody will come because you don't have anything there already. But we've been, very lucky to already have a good email list, a great following on LinkedIn, and, like kind of being super active there. We've been producing content since 2006, honestly. So it's just been, I think all of those factors kind of motivated us to say, like, this decision makes sense to kind of move forward with.
Makes sense. So you're saying that having already a community helped you with FigPie, but how did it help you actually grow InvestPro, for example? Because that was the main reason. FigPie was there to actually help to help InvestPro to grow further, right? So that you can control all the experiments and have more experience. So how did that help to InvestPro actually?
I don't know if FigPie necessarily helps invest, but it lets us have a little bit more, again, be a little bit more choosy about the type of clients that we want to take on. It's hard to, some consulting, like some companies are, might be a little bit more difficult to work with, or they don't have a lot of traffic, or they don't have a lot of conversions, and it just becomes a little bit challenging to do consulting with them for one reason or another. So we're able to kind of position ourselves in a way that we can now be more selective because we have kind of FigPie. And then also the amount of kind of data that you get from having that platform is very useful for, our own internal tools. So looking at kind of, okay, well, these are like some of the experiments that are being run on our platform. This is what's happening on our platform. This is how people are using our platform. And it gives us kind of insight into, okay, well, what can be done better, A, to improve the tool, and B, to also benefit from some of the consulting that we already do.
Cool. So I usually don't take this kind of content, but I think you're the best person to do that. So I want to know, like, experiments that you have done so far, 16 years of your work, what have you learned, like 5 things that marketers still do wrong and do not do a hypothesis around it, and they just blatantly just go with it because of the popular knowledge or popular stuff that actually don't work, and you've done it and you always have to prove them wrong. So what kind of experiments, or what kind of 5 things that you will tell growth marketers, like, hey, like these things, 5 things you just care about when doing an experiment on running some kind of tool like FigPie or Hotjar or whatever that is?
Well, the number one thing that I would say is never copy your competitors. And people love to look at what their competitors are doing and copying exactly what they're doing. So that's the number one thing that I would say, is that it's just like a no-no. And,
I'll stop you there. So what if you don't copy a competitor? Is it like don't copy the copy of the competitor, don't copy the style of the competitor, don't copy the jargons of the competitor? Like, what exactly you mean by don't copy a competitor?
I would say all of those, like don't copy the design, and don't copy the, the content that's on their site as well. Because ultimately, your visitor and their needs are uniquely different. And we've seen that time and time again, where a lot of our own clients will, and right now you look at everything looks the same. Like you go to like an e-commerce store, like you can't even distinguish. You take away their logo, you can't even distinguish who they are, because everything looks the same. And that's what you kind of want to distinguish yourself. Well, I'm not the same, and I want to, offer something a little bit unique and different to clients. Now, I will say that it's challenging sometimes. For example, like in e-commerce, that's a good space to kind of talk about, is that people in general, like visitors, are used to seeing, the site in a certain way. So when they see something a little bit different, sometimes that could cause a negative experience. So you have to be really careful about how to go about things. So, if there's a standard for the industry, I'm not saying don't follow the standard for the industry. You should, you should look at what the standards are. You should, try to comply as much as possible. But looking at, for example, Amazon added this new, feature on their site. Oh, I need to add that. You're not going to compete with Amazon. Like Amazon is not, and Amazon customers are not your customers. They're different. So you need to kind of understand, again, the needs. And the second thing I would say, and that kind of goes along with my first point, is that you need to talk to your actual customers. So a lot of times, even like if you have a SaaS tool, if you have, like another solution, people tend to create what they think their customers want. But when you actually get on the phone and you talk to them, you recognize, hey, this isn't actually what they want. This isn't actually what their struggling moment was, and what led them to actually hire our product or service. So I would, definitely recommend as much as possible to talk to customers and kind of engage kind of like what are their actual needs.
I'll again stop you there.
Yeah.
Because I'm right now at FigPi's website, and I'm also at Hotjar website, and the headline is very similar, right? So Hotjar says, understand your users really experiencing your site without drowning in numbers, and you say know exactly what users do, why, and exactly how to improve. And at User Pilot, like, I mean, our competitors are also, like, the headline is similar. They call themselves product-led growth software. We call ourselves product experience software, but both of the things do the same goddamn thing, right? And there's a little bit of differentiation. SaaS cannot be that much of differentiated. So I want to know, like, right now as a growth marketer, I have to go and fight my boss. Hey, we should not look at their website at all. Like,
not at all. I wouldn't say not at all, Azar. Like, you definitely need to know the competitive landscape. Like, you need to know what they're doing. You need to be aware of, the other sites and how they're presenting their information and all of that. But I'm just saying that, because they're doing this, I want to do this. And, I've had literally clients tell me, like, so-and-so is testing this, let's test it as well. Or a really famous one is, like the hamburger menu, like this one company called, I think it was like Caffeine. I forgot their name, but I'll let you know what it is, and maybe you can put it in the notes. But anyways, they had a case study how they tested, writing the word menu versus putting a hamburger menu, and they saw an increase in conversions. And so Booking.com decided they're going to run the same experiment. Let's see how our customers interact. And then they had nothing, no difference whatsoever. It didn't matter to the customers whether it was, said the word menu or had a hamburger menu. So ultimately, and I think like Booking.com can afford to do that, right? They can launch experiments and they won't have a problem. They have the resources, they have the money, they have the developers, they don't have a problem. But what happens is it's the smaller guys that kind of, suffer. They don't have the budgets and they're trying to run experiments, and the experiments are literally like they have no basis. It's just because my competitor is doing it. So what I'm trying to say is that, just you need to be aware of what's going on and what they're doing and what they're launching, but you don't want to just say, because they're doing this, let me, do it. What I would say is just say they launch a new feature that's really cool. And you say, oh, wow, they're launching this feature. Let me look into it. I would look at my data, try to understand, does this make sense for me to launch? And then, once I've kind of found that there is a need to launch a similar feature on the site, a change in design, change in copy, whatever it is, then, I've justified it with data, and it's not just because my competitors are doing it.
Makes sense. Okay, what's the second thing?
So the second thing, like I said, is in order to kind of avoid some of those things and to find that unique value is interviewing the customers. You know, people are coming to your website, offer them like a $25 gift card and tell them, hey, I want to just talk to you and understand, you know, when you first thought of us, what led you to kind of understand or to decide on this product or service, whatever it is. Once I gain that understanding and I have that kind of background, you're able to kind of pull unique, you know, pieces of copy, unique marketing perspective, you know, initiatives based on what they're saying, because you start understanding their story. Like, for example, one of our clients is, you know, like an online technology magazine, and they, you know, we were talking to their customers because we do the interviews for our clients, and so we were talking to the customers, and we understood that, you know, the reason why the woman subscribed to a specific, you know, the specific technology magazine was because she wanted to have that bonding experience with her daughter. They always bonded over some of the articles in that magazine. So how can a marketer take that information and use it? You know what I'm saying? Like, suddenly now, like, you know, trying to, of course, we have to do several, you know, interviews and see that there's that trend. But, you know, now I know that this is a conversation piece that's being used for either like her daughter or like a friend or whatever it is. So using that marketing information in my copy and some of the campaigns that I run, et cetera, is going to use that perspective, and it's going to be able to kind of bring in more customers and engage them more and differently.
Makes sense. Makes sense. But I still have another question pop up immediately when you talk about the second thing, is that what if your current customers are not the right audience, and what if your product and software is evolving and you're running after different future customers? And so what would you do then? Because current customers are not the representative of your future customers. Then
so why did I guess my question to you is, why did the current customers then decide on your service?
Oh, because it was cheap. Let's say it was cheap, or it was reasonable. You were giving a lot of features for a very specific price, or because it was you know, the services were great, the support was great, but there was no feature parity for the customer, right? So I'm just giving you, like, I see other marketers also have the same problem. They say, oh, right now so for example, one of your competitors, they used to target SaaS companies, and now they moved on from SaaS to e-commerce, and they're moving towards more D2C. Okay, so
Yep.
SaaS is not their audience anymore. Both of your competitors were selling to SaaS and now moving towards D2C and e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
Then what do you do? Do you talk to your current customers, or do you talk to your prospect customers and then make the copy around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, each company has kind of a unique position. I don't think that you can't find value with your current customers. I know that you're saying, well, they're hiring because of this, that's an assumption. But actually, when you talk to the customers, you'll find out why it is. And I bet you anything that a lot of these companies that are making that move have had conversations possibly with customers, and they found that there is a tendency and a trend, you know, to be kind of more D2C or e-commerce or whatever it is. And that's why kind of they've made that direction, they've made that call. Does that make sense? So like, you know, for example, I might have an assumption that my customer base is XYZ. You know, and I get this company is just because fresh in my mind, because I recently had an interview with them, which is the technology subscription. They had an assumption that their target market and their typical customer is a male that is, you know, 60 plus years old, almost retired. You know, that's the profile. That's the profile of the customer that they have. But then just by kind of conducting these interviews, we're finding that no, there's actually like a range of people. And maybe the majority is that male, but we're finding based on the interviews that there are actually a lot of women, and there actually are a lot of students and young people. And those are the ones that we need to kind of talk to in order to get that broad idea of how to do more marketing towards that group. So what I'm trying to say is, some of those companies that you're talking about that have changed and pivoted to a different target market, I tend to say that they've pivoted because they have some data, some concrete data, you know, and that's out of their conversations with customers, whatever it is. And that's what kind of helped them decide that this makes sense to pivot in this direction, you know. And same thing with this software, this subscription technology subscription magazine. We also know that we might pivot and focus more on a different target market based on the interviews that we're conducting. It doesn't mean that the target market, the old target market, doesn't exist. They do, but we still are learning more to kind of target other markets as well based on the conversation that we're having.
Cool. Let's jump on to the third one.
So the third one that I would say is that try to avoid, you know, a lot of CROs fall into the problem when it comes to A/B testing is just template tweaking, changing a button, you know, moving things here and there. And that's honestly, like, that's not conversion rate optimization. And I've been, you know, on a mission in my life to try to dispel, like, you know, the true meaning of what people think CRO is and what it actually is. And it's so much more broad, and it involves, of course, UX and UI, but it also involves, you know, like those strategic kind of long-term projects. And you have to look at the whole picture. You cannot just be focused on the website as if the website kind of exists in a vacuum or something like that. It doesn't. You know, there's so much more that you have to kind of look at and consider when you're coming up with the different experiments that you're going to be running on your site.
Got it. Makes sense. That's totally true, because that Andrew Kaplan came to the podcast and from Vistia and said, like, you know, you have to take bigger swings. So this is about taking bigger swings, not just changing the button color and stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes you can run those experiments, those small experiments. But again, like, you know, if you're expecting, some people are expecting like 800% increase in conversions because you've seen case studies like that. You and I have seen them all the time. They're just not realistic, and those tests are probably not even valid. So that's the reality.
Makes sense. Do you have the fourth thing?
The fourth thing I would say is also that you want to make sure that you do kind of reach a statistical significance. So you should know some stats around running experiments. Don't just like run an experiment and, you know, not know how long you should be running it, not know how many conversions you should be getting, not know all those kind of how you reach kind of statistical significance. And also, I always tend to say to people, plug the information from the experiment into another calculator just to validate the data as well.
Makes sense. But a typical CRO would know this, right?
Yeah, you would hope, but sometimes you're surprised.
Okay. What's the last thing?
And the last thing I would say is that be bold. You know, a lot of times we're a little bit sometimes scared to take risks and experiment something a little bit, you know, different that people aren't expecting. But, you know, a lot of the times if that's data backed and you've done your homework, you know, you're going to get kind of like a big win from doing something a little bit more bold and that's out there.
Cool. Makes sense. Thank you for these. I think this content just brings your story on top and gives more juice to it. So we'll jump into the rapid fire round, and you just have to answer quickly because we already taken a lot of time. If you have $1,000 today for your existing brand starting from zero, where will you spend it?
I would probably spend it building some sort of like a tribe, because I think that, again, you need that following first before you're actually able to kind of launch whatever it is that you're trying to launch.
What stage of growth do you really love? Acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, or referral?
I would probably say, I mean, we've been kind of in the activation phase right now with our FigPie solution. So it's been kind of exciting to, you know, get people onboarded onto the tool and whatnot. So I'm very excited about that, at least right now. Maybe in a few months, I'll be at a different state.
Cool. What book would you recommend to me and the audience?
So it's a little bit different than what you would expect. There's a book by Samantha Power, and it's called I'm blanking now. The Idealist Dilemma. What is it? Hold on. I'm gonna look it up quickly. But it's actually a really good book, and I think that sometimes we think that there are certain books that we're supposed to listen to or follow, but you know, this is called An Education of an Idealist by Samantha Power. It's a memoir, and I think that marketers can learn from lots of different experiences. And obviously she has a very political experience, but I still think that there's a lot of value in what you can learn from her experiences and her life and negotiations and the different types of things that are happening at any point in time, within her experience as the US ambassador.
Cool. What's one favorite growth marketer you really like?
I love Avinash. I know that he's not necessarily considered a growth marketer, but his newsletter and the tidbits and the nuggets that he provides
Avinash from?
Avinash Sheikh.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me?
No.
You've never heard of Avinash?
No.
I hit subscribe to his newsletter. It's great. He always has great information, and he definitely has obviously that amazing following that he's been able to grow over the years of his experience. But he's kind of like the father of analytics. So I obviously have, a preference because of the data side of that. But I just find that him and somebody like Ann Handley, who's content marketer, they just have really great kind of information that can be, you can take it in as a marketer and utilize it somehow in your life in different ways and in the experiences that you have.
Makes sense. I'll check it out and put in the show notes. What's one of the bad piece advice you've ever got, and you want growth marketers to be staying away from it?
I mean, this is kind of interesting because from my perspective, when I went into kind of marketing in general, I got a lot of pushback from my family. And so, a lot of them were just quit, stop it, get out of it. This is not for you. This is not going to go anywhere. Da, da, da. So I would just say that sometimes you do get those negative influences, and from my experience, you just kind of push on and you can prove everybody wrong.
Cool. Prove everybody wrong, and don't let yourself be judged by other people and just give up. So that's the advice that you've been saying. Cool. Thanks for coming over, and really appreciate it. I hope a lot of growth marketers can learn something from an industry veteran and OG like you. And so yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for coming over.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. Cool. So this will be Ayat will record it later on. I want to say, the things that you learned over time before 14 years, right? Did you actually learn from somebody else, or did you create it yourself? Because that's something I've been thinking about, people who the fresh content that you coming up these days because of your experience right now for 14 years. But the time when you started, where did you actually start?
Well, I don't know if you know my history, but actually before, and this is why probably my family was not very supportive, is that I was actually a teacher, and I wasn't actually, marketing was not even on the top of my mind at all. I wasn't even thinking about it. But then things happened in my life, and I decided after having a child that I didn't want to do education anymore. I already had my own children to raise. I didn't need any other kids. So I decided to kind of pivot and took classes and studied marketing. But when I started, there was very little information on conversion rate optimization. Everybody was kind of buzzing about SEO at the time because SEO was so important to get the ranking. And I don't know if you remember also, you look younger, but anyways, those days.
I was in 2008. I started my bachelor's degree, so I was a kid. I don't have any context about that.
Yeah. So in those days, people would create pieces of content and just literally rig the content pieces with the words that they wanted to rank for, because the algorithm was so simple at that time. So I didn't have a lot of people to learn from. And the thing is with marketing, though, is that you can still take from old marketing books and all the different, the different marketing information from long ago could still be applicable. You just have to kind of advance it so that it makes sense for the time that we're in right now. And then at the same time, also, when we were starting our agency, the Eisenbergs also were kind of the leaders. I don't know if you know them, Brian Eisenberg and Jeffrey Eisenberg. They were the leaders in conversion rate optimization. So definitely went to they had a retreat, 2-day retreat, definitely went to their retreat, learned as much as I could from them, but they were still starting out. They still didn't know everything about CRO. So, at that time, you're kind of fumbling through, because you're learning, everybody else is learning. It's still a very new type of industry. So I think it's kind of like challenging and in that way, because there aren't a lot of marketers, but you just have to kind of rely on the data that's around you, and that's what we were able to do.
Makes sense. But do you think there's any old book on CRO that people can read and still get some ideas on it, or is it just like copywriting old books that Dave Gerhardt is talking about and stuff?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say that like the Eisenberg books, they were a good start, at least a head start. But again, they're a little bit outdated. Even our book, like we wrote our book in 2009, so it's outdated. Like it needs, like we need, kind of more current information. So I would say that if you want to go back, I wouldn't really go back in time to some of those older references. I would look at what's currently out there, like, our blog, CXL blog, a lot of those places have like the right information, the more current information. So especially when it comes to CRO. But, like, again, old marketing books till now that we can all kind of benefit from. And they haven't lost their value. But CRO, I think it's just advanced so much that it's a little bit challenging to kind of look at the old stuff.
Makes sense. Thank you for coming over and giving us a little bit more education. I always want to chat with you. I still haven't done your podcast, your course, but that's on my list.